From the southeastern corner of western North Carolina, this is Polk Lore. I'm your host, James Hernishin. And we're back to the 2026 campaign. My guest this episode is another Democrat who would very much like to represent a piece of North Carolina in the U.S. House, specifically District 14, which includes the southeastern portions of Polk County. If you live in Tryon, Columbus, Green Creek, Mill Spring, or select neighborhoods of White Oak, and you plan on voting in the Democratic Party primary next March, you will see Brent Caldwell's name on your ballot. Unless, of course, no one else files to run. There are still a few weeks left to submit election papers in case you're thinking about it. NC 14 was redrawn in the most recent round of redistricting a couple of years ago. It's no secret that it was crafted carefully to accommodate the political needs of Tim Moore, who was then Speaker of the North Carolina State House. This particular gerrymander involves shifting the district westward by excluding Democrat-leaning Black and Latino voters on the outskirts of Charlotte and replacing them with more reliably Republican voters in Polk County. Previously, the district had been represented for one term by Democrat Jeff Jackson, who found himself redistricted out of contention, but then went on to win the statewide election for Attorney General. As predicted, Tim Moore easily won his race. All of which is to say, the new District 14 skews strongly to the right and is now represented by a legislator with considerable institutional support, making it hard to dream up scenarios in which even the most popular Democrat can win. A serious challenger in the Republican primary is just as unlikely, barring some kind of seismic shift in the political landscape. My guest decided to take up that challenge anyway, and despite the odds, there's a good chance he actually knows what he's getting into. Brent Caldwell may not be familiar to most voters, and he has never run for public office before, but he's been working behind the scenes in the Democratic Party for decades. Plus, he's already paid a couple of visits to Polk County. He showed up for the No Kings rally in Columbus last month and returned a couple of weeks later to attend a Polk Democrats gathering at Fence. Just before that event, we found a couple of rocking chairs on the porch of the Democratic Party headquarters in Columbus and turned on the microphones. Brent Caldwell, welcome to Polk Lore.
Thanks for having me, James. And I will say this is actually the very first interview I've had on the campaign. And so I'm very much looking forward to it.
Well, I know we have a lot of campaign left, so this won't be your last one.
No, I don't think so. I announced 4 weeks ago.
Okay.
And you were just the first who invited me that seemed worth being taken up on.
All right. Well, let's use this as a practice round then. So first, tell us who you are and how you ended up being a candidate for this position.
That is a long story, but I can go, the summary would be that, I'm Brent Caldwell, a born and bred Southerner who did not expect to get into politics, but that rings a little hollow because now I've been in it pretty deeply for 20 years. Growing up, I always thought I was going to be a chemist. I did chemistry Olympiads in high school, and I was all about science. My parents had a science-related profession, but when I was in 10th grade, my mom was called up to Lieutenant Colonel Peggy Caldwell, was called up to the Iraq War from the Army Reserves. I was hastened to add that she was stationed in Fort Knox, and so that was when I first started getting involved in politics. Around that time, there were all these anti-gay ballot initiatives to drive turnout in the 2004 election in a cynical way. And people in my rural Southern high school took that as license to bully the handful of gay students that we had. So I was speaking up for them. And then I realized I needed to take part. And then I went off to Ole Miss, studying for BS in pharmaceutical sciences, continuing on the path. But our worst fears about the Iraq War came true. That fell apart. The economy went off the cliff. And then also we had some hope. And I don't mean to be cheesy, but the Obama campaign, there was a special election in Mississippi, and that got me very excited. And I decided that science could be set aside for a while, and that there was a political need that was much more urgent. And so I got into professional politics, and I worked on campaigns for a living, traveling around the country. I went to DC, New Mexico, Mississippi, Illinois, Louisiana, North Carolina. And then my then girlfriend, now wife, and I were tired of moving around. She's also from Mississippi, and we said, where can we settle? We both liked North Carolina. I'd worked on a campaign here. She grew up going to Hendersonville, and so we moved here in 2014. And then actually I got off the campaign trail in 2015, went to law school at Duke, and clerked for a year in Greensboro and been practicing in Charlotte ever since then. So I have a young legal career and a young family. Um, but there were things happening that I felt I needed to speak up about. People in South Charlotte were encouraging me to look at this race or look at a race, and I never thought I'd be a candidate. But when I evaluated it, I concluded that it was winnable and that there would be value in getting out here and laying it plain, so to speak. I jumped in and was doing behind scenes work since March, really, and then just 4 weeks ago, I officially announced and did the press release and all that.
So you chose to run in NC-14, which is a newly redrawn district, and it's represented now by one of the most powerful Republicans in the state, Tim Moore. That must be a little daunting. So why did you want to take on Tim Moore?
I think that Tim Moore, well, yes, he was quite powerful in the state house as the Speaker of the House. Now he is just one of 435 in the federal Congress, and I don't believe that power translates as correctly. But there are many things about him. I like to stay hopeful and forward-looking, and that will be the basis of my campaign. But there are many things about him that show weakness. He has, whether rightly or wrongly, I would say probably rightly, a reputation for being cynical and self-interested. There are the sordid facts that many of us know about, and if you don't, you'll be hearing about them over the course of the campaign from me or from other groups. And so I think that Tim Moore is actually one of the weaker Republicans. Yes, he has a lot of political connections and strength, but as far as his personal profile, it's on the weaker side because everyone knows him, nobody loves him. And I think that if you have a forward-looking, enthusiastic, and I'll say young candidate with I'll say a beautiful family, I'll take some license there. I think that would draw a strong contrast that will lead to his defeat. The district I looked recently, it's Cook +6. The partisan voting index is +6, and actually that's one of the more competitive of the gerrymandered districts in the state. And I was looking around, and I was thinking about Virginia's 7th district in 2018. That was also a Cook Republican +6 district, and a Democrat won there against Dave Bratt, who was Tea Party, so early MAGA candidate. So in some ways similar to Moore. It was also an election where there's a backlash to a Trump administration term. And the Democrat who won there was Abigail Spanberger, and she was just elected governor of Virginia. So I think I wouldn't be in the race if I didn't think it was a winnable race. And I have, from my prior political experience, some ideas to make the most of the money we're going to be able to raise. And I think my platform will beat his every day. So if I can get out there and talk to people and just be considered, I'm confident that I'll win. The question is, am I going to be able to get out there, communicate, and be considered? And I'm working hard to get out and build the resources and meet the people who will allow me to do that.
Well, what are you doing to build resources? I mean, we're talking about fundraising.
Yes,
basically. And again, this is a pretty Republican district, at least this half of it is. Gets bluer the closer you get to Charlotte. But I mean, what do you do to try to scare up money in this part of the state?
Well, when I worked in campaigns, worked on campaigns, and I also managed some campaigns and was a label organizer. But when I worked on campaigns, I was mostly a fundraiser, and there's no easy way about it. You have to dial for dollars. People always hope that the money's going to come in from emails, now text. People come up, they'll have a finance committee, and they'll raise $1,000 and they'll ask 5 people to raise $1,000, and things like that do not work. What has to happen is me calling people, introducing myself, and building rapport, showing them that race is worth investing in. And I find it to be a little depressing, but that is how I spend the most of my campaign time. If I get in office, I fully intend to change that based on my own experience working on campaigns. I met many first-time candidates who said, I want to go out there, I want to meet with these people, hear what their concerns are. I want to research this policy and come up propose solutions to solve problems that I'm seeing or that I hear about over the course of the campaign, which is what I think campaigns should be about. Instead, the consultants and people like me as staff say, no, you need to sit in a room and dial for dollars, 20 to 35 hours a week. I do not have the capacity to do that. I was talking to a former boss who served 5 terms in Congress, and she advised that I take a leave of absence from my work and that I do this full time, but that's just not the situation that I'm in. So I squeeze it in wherever I can. I was calling on the way here. I had an hour and 40 minutes in the car. I call, on my lunch break, I call whenever I can, just to try to get a conversation going. Because I think that, there are these people who traditionally donate, and I think too often they go for the big races. I was at a Roy Cooper race or event in Gastonia, and there were, you know, I don't well over 240 people there. I didn't get exact numbers, but I heard they blew their fundraising target through the roof. And I wish the people in that room, and I try to explain to them that, a race like mine is, and other equivalent races like mine are worth investing in, because Roy Cooper can't be everywhere. And I need to get the resources to have the staff to drive turnout, because the people who turn out for me are very likely to vote for Roy Cooper as well. So, don't just spend $100 million on Roy Cooper's Senate campaign. $400,000 or $500,000 in a race like mine could make all the difference for governor, hopefully future Senator Cooper, and could lead to surprises surprise to others. But I'm confident, like me, being elected to the House.
Well, you mentioned Abigail Spanberger, who was just elected governor of
Virginia.
Sorry. I'd like to ask you, if you had to choose between the Spanberger model and the Zoran Mamdani model in New York, where you just elected mayor-elect of New York City, those are generally considered the two different approaches to democratic politics. One is very, very progressive and grassroots, and one is a little bit more moderate, a little bit more establishment. Although, to be fair, and I want everyone to understand where I stand on this, what I saw last week with all the Democratic victories across the country was that all the successful Democrats were running on affordability platforms. So I'm not asking you to talk policy, but just more like strategy. Who are you appealing to? Are you looking for small dollar contributors from places like Polk County, or are you going to look for, where the money is?
Both. I mean, the recurring contributions on a campaign, if someone signs up and says, I'm going to give, like my monthly newspaper subscription, or, what I spend on coffee, $10, $25 a month to a campaign, that recurring revenue is very helpful to campaigns, because it allows us to project forward, map out our paid media strategy with some confidence that we're going to have the funds. But of course, someone who can donate $1,000, that's a great boost. So my heart is with the small dollar donors, because that's, kind of, where I come from, the kind of people who can donate, you just call them out of the blue and they can donate $1,000, $2,000. Those aren't the kind of people that I grew up with. And I guess you said, not getting into policy, but I will drop this. One of the proposals that I'm very strong on, or that I want to talk about everywhere I can, is right now, the primary election, you can give $3,500, and in the general, you can give $3,500. And if you're sitting around calling, that's a soft corruption, and it's intended to be that way. If you're calling people who can donate $3,500 at a time, you're only talking to a small segment of society. And the people who have designed the system by making up jurisprudence equating money to speech from the 1970s to now, there's a series of cases starting, Judge Lewis Powell, not to get too deep in the weeds, but he wrote this memo called the Powell Memorandum, saying, we're losing a culture, but we have money, we need to deploy it. He got on the Supreme Court, and then he wrote the opinion, the first one, that said that money is speech. And they have been making that up and reinforcing it from then to Citizens United. And they continue to do that to change the definition of corruption and to tilt the tables in favor of people who have deep pockets, because they believe those are the kind of people who should rule. And so America stood up against that kind of aristocracy before in a different form, and now it's back with deep-pocketed people trying to control our politics. But that was a bit of an aside. And so I call both, but I believe that the max contribution in the primary election or a general election should only be 1% of median income. So it should be about $740. And the reason for that is because I want to take away the incentive for people to have to spend all their time dialing for dollars. That's still pretty high, but I think that would push us more towards, emails, text blasts, passing the hat at events, and away from sitting in a room just calling people. And so that's why I proposed that. But I have to go after it wherever I can to try to build up the war chest. And as long as no one is too, as long as they share my values, I'm willing to talk to them and take their support, because I'm going to use it to spread my own voice. But I got off track. I don't believe I fully answered your question about the different. You asked about the different wings of the party, and
well, we'll get to that.
Okay.
But let's talk first about Polk County and rural North Carolina, rural America, because this is really why the Republicans are running Washington right now, right? Because the electoral system in America right now is skewed towards rural Americans. They have disproportionate amount of power in Congress and through the Electoral College, the White House. So what happens in places like Polk County is really important, in my opinion, more so even than the urban centers, because those are pretty much given to Democratic control. But again, the system is weighted in favor of rural Americans. So what do you tell a Polk County resident? You guys should be voting Democrat. Like, how do you make that case?
Well, to go, we will get into which wing of the party I'm in, and I will say that I represent an older tradition in the party, the Yellow Dog Democrat. I actually, for years, have had a political blog called YellowDogWire.com. My grandfather was a Yellow Dog Democrat. He helped Jimmy Carter get elected in North Georgia when he was running for governor, and then he helped him to the extent it was needed when he was running for president. And in fact, he lived in a manufactured home, and on the mantle it was family photo, center police clock, and then signed photo from Jimmy Carter. And so that is a unique tradition. And I think that it is a tradition that where faith is important, where people understand that community can be a matter of life and death. And, when you're out here, you have to rely on yourself. You have to watch out for each other. I mean, this isn't that rural, but that sent it at one time it was, and it's actually less rural now because of previous Yellow Dog Democrats like Lyndon Johnson, who, pushed electrification, the Southern Democrats who they had downsides, obviously, in the 20s and 30s and 40s, but they also did a lot to get investment in the area. And then you go back even further, there was a progressive tradition that at the time there was only one party, so they were Democrats who were building roads. And so I represent that interpretation of progressivism, of we are your neighbor's keeper, that it's not about just like the big centers of capital, but it's about the rural areas, the farms, small farms, making sure that they are able to get good pay for the work that they do. I mean, that was some of the original progressive issues about they do all this work to raise crops, and then they they were getting skimmed or messed over when they put it on the train, and so they couldn't get it to market. Now it's just because there was a big force that was standing in between them. And I just wished, and also there's a bit of a populism and a cynicism about financial elites that in some ways I think we need to rediscover. Like in my grandfather's generation, you would know that you should not trust a banker or a real estate developer from New York City, and rightly or wrongly, but that's just how, I was reared. And so I always had that cynicism about them of, they're not like us and they don't know our problems, and, they can say what they want, but until they're actually improving the material benefits of our lives, I'm not going to be won over by them. And so in Polk County, we're certainly not seeing that. I mean, Polk County is one of the biggest industries here is the equestrian industry. And the American Horse Council has been writing articles about how tariffs are impacting the industry. Raising horses is an international business. You want as much of a market as you could possibly get, because if you have a beautiful $100,000 horse, you want to be able to sell it. Or if you see one that you want to import, you don't want to pay a huge tariff on it. You don't want to just sell to Americans. You want to sell to the kind of people who are buying thoroughbreds like that. And there's a tradition in the Middle East, there's a tradition in Europe, and you want to be able to access those markets. And then also the tariffs impact things like an aluminum horse trailer or metal horse trailer. That's a major purchase, and you don't want 25% on top of something that you're only buying every 5 or 10 years, but you need right now. And so the tariffs are greatly impacting Polk County in that way. And then also another major industry in the area is the healthcare industry. And it would benefit greatly by continuing these Obamacare subsidies because if people don't have health insurance, it's not like they just, scrape it together and then go get seen. What they do is they just hold off going to the doctor as long as they can. And that leads to increased mortality, and it leads to avoidable deaths. And also it leads to a strain on the healthcare system. And so, as I said, like many rural areas, one of the biggest employers around here are the hospitals, and they rely very much on Medicaid and Medicare to be able to pay their bills, and support make the pay that someone who has the training of a nurse practitioner or a doctor has, what they've earned. And if you can't pay them something like that, they'll go elsewhere. And then the rural hospitals will start shutting down. And so, those are two ways that the current administration is falling down on providing material benefits to the county, and something that I have top of mind and that I will work to reverse, if and when I'm elected.
Well, I was going to ask you what you thought Polk County residents might want from their congressman, but you kind of anticipated that question by talking about current events. Like, we're almost 40 days into the longest government shutdown in American history. If someone was to tell you, I think the Democrats should stop holding out and just let the government open back up, you would tell them, no, the Medicare subsidies are too important?
I do not. I do not think that the government should be able to shut down, and I do not think that this should be a leverage point. But it wasn't the Democrats who pioneered using these in that way to make policy concessions. I mean, this is now the longest running government shutdown in history. The second longest was also in the Trump administration, where they were trying to repeal Obamacare. There was another very long one where Ted Cruz basically just trying to build up his name and took them down the garden path, and they didn't get anything out of it, if I remember correctly. I think that was 2013 or 2014. So it is their hardball policies that have put this on the table as a tactic. And I think too often there's this idea that I think that a lot of Republicans, because they have this, many of them have this dog eat dog, it's all a jungle, there are only individuals and families, and we're all at war with each other all the time mentality. They look at Democrats and they think that we're soft and that we're not willing to fight. Well, that is certainly not true. Democrats have taken on big fights and won. We completely transformed the South through Lyndon Johnson. We led America to victory in both world wars, and we're as tough as anybody. There are old Union protests where they were all Democrats, and those are some fierce people fighting for their rights. And so I'm ready for this fight, and I'm glad that they're taking a stand here, because these are the kind of people. Trump's a bully. Many of his supporters are bullies, and the way you overcome a bully is you stand up to them, and they usually slink away. But I think that the best outcome here would be a grand bargain that took this tactic off the table. I think that as part of the resolution, I would like to see three things. I want the Obamacare subsidies extended. I'm okay with this 1-year compromise, but that has been floated in this week, but I wish it was permanent, and we're going to have this fight again if it's only 1 year. I think that we should pass a law that says if a budget is not passed, then you just continue at prior funding levels, and so that a government shutdown is not an option. You will just go with how it was previously until you pass a new budget. And then the third, which may seem off base, but I think now is the time to get it. You may have heard that Trump has gone through this process where he has applied for saying he was wrongfully prosecuted, and he's trying to get, I think it's $230 million in compensation. I think as part of this, we should also say that, if someone who would benefit from the compensation should not be making that decision, and that we should strip that power from them. And that may seem a little off the wall, but I think in this moment, we have the leverage and we should do that. And I think that's, like an 80% plus support issue where no one thinks that Trump should get $200 million that he can just apply for and then sign off on himself from the public treasury.
Well, I don't think you're going to get a lot of argument about a lot of those things, especially from Democrats. At first, you have to win this primary. I don't know anybody else who's declared yet, but you're going to have to shift after the primary to taking on the task of convincing Republicans, soft Republicans, swing voters, independents who didn't support the Democrats last time around.
Mhm.
So this is really my favorite question of these interviews is, how do you convince somebody who has been, at least for the last 17 years or so, solidly Republican, or say a young voter who has been raised in a Republican family? How do you convince them that the Democrats are worth giving a chance?
Yes, the Democratic tax that voters put on the party is strong. There was some research that came out recently. I believe it's called from the Institute of Working Class Politics that said they put two different profiles up and they had the exact same positions on issues, but one was an independent and one was a Democrat. And on average, the Democrat in among the white working class and in rural area lost 10% of support just from being a Democrat. And it's tough. I thought about this a lot. My approach will be two things. One, I am not you could say skilled or whatever enough to, be all things for all people. And I think that me being authentic and saying this is what I truly believe, and we can agree to disagree, but I will explain my beliefs to you. I think that will win respect. And I think, this idea of, figure out what the people want, figure out what the people are going and then run out to lead them. I disagree with that approach. I think you should just get out there, say what you truly believe. And, that's more likely to resonate than just being a shapeshifter, because people understand what you're doing when you're doing that. And then two, I will like to make the point clearly that, I am who they used to be or who their family used to be. You talk to a lot of these people and they say, oh, I like the Democratic Party until, I liked them up through JFK. I liked them up through LBJ. There's this understanding in America that the Democratic Party really powered the 20th century. And from 1932 to 1994, Republicans only controlled the House of Representatives in one Congress. All of the things that we are proud of, or many of the things that we are proud of in the 20th century, come from the Democrats. And the Republican, I don't say this to be partisan, but I'm going to cheer for my side. But I'm not downing the Republicans, but their resume is thin. We passed Social Security, we passed Medicaid, we passed Medicare. These programs that many people who now vote Republican recognize are very important. We said we were going to the moon and made it happen. And so, I will proudly talk about my party's history. And I will explain that, these things that if you look back in history that you believe were good, well, they come from, someone who has my party's belief system. And so please consider me not as just like some Democrat who doesn't merit any further discussion, but as someone who has policies that are intended to benefit your life. And so, and then also there are, I am not, because I'm, this Southern yellow dog Democrat, I am not like, the National Democratic Party. I have different positions on guns. I have different positions on immigration than, I think the Democratic stereotype is I have my concealed carry permit. I was carrying today. My sidearm is in my car right now. And that's, not anything special, but that's just because, I'm from Mississippi and I got it as soon as I could. And, it's just something that I do. And so it's really what just needs to happen is, if I can get past that initial dismissal, I think that people will see that I am coming from a very similar place to where they are. And so the way to get past that is just to work very hard to have the conversations that other Democrats aren't taking the time to have.
Well, it brings up something I've heard several times on other podcasts that I listen to, and that's that the American people, including a lot of Republicans, aren't really opposed to a lot of what Democrats stand for and have been pushing for 100 years. It's just the messaging, the envelope that the Democratic Party has wrapped itself in part by relying heavily on rich donors in the same way that the Republicans do. So you're saying if we can just get to the heart of what the party's really all about, sort of unwrite the recent history, the recent messaging, the recent strategic decisions, get back to basics?
In some ways, I mean, there's always going to be an argument about what the basics are, there's the Democratic Party, basically socially, a social democrat party. Are they a democratic socialist party? Are they a capitalist party? Um, I would say it's the third one. If you just look at our tradition, there are people who, I think that they were like, oh, the Democrats should be a democratic socialist party. I don't think that's going to work. I don't think that democratic socialism itself will work.
Certainly not around here.
No, I mean, whether it's around here, I don't think it's going to work anywhere like where it's fully implemented, because I have a master's in political sociology. And so the state of debate about, what these different words mean in America leaves a lot to be desired, to put it nicely. And I am definitely, I think all Democrats have had this annoying thing where you're being told that like Hillary Clinton is a communist, which is just not at all true. Like the word communist means something. The word democratic socialism means something, which means that you want to own the means of production. But I think the fundamental American position is actually, not we all, but the majority position is that we recognize that, uh, you know, free markets and, the ability to open your own business, uh, in many ways is the goose that laid the golden century, but also that it can get out of control, and that we need to do things like, provide healthcare for everyone, make sure that the market doesn't completely, you know, make housing unaffordable, and just make sure that this wild or this powerful engine, that drives our economy, doesn't crush people, and that, we protect people who are being harmed by it. We need that now more than ever, because we are also about to see the rise of artificial intelligence. Is actually right there on the homepage of my website, because I think it's going to be very transformative. And the last time America had a technological shift on this scale that impacted how people work and earn a living, we completely failed. And that shift was the introduction of the shipping container, which was, developed in the 50s and 60s. And then that's what allowed us to offshore manufacturing. And the problem is, that transition may have been inevitable. And I think that some manufacturers are going to come here. I think that it is, help build wealth in other parts of the globe that is a good for, those people that I don't have a problem with. But the problem that I have is when that happened, we blamed the individuals who were suffering the consequences of it, rather than recognizing that it was just a huge societal shift that we needed to provide some aid and to provide some guardrails to make sure people weren't torn asunder by. Uh, and so, the paradigm went from, things have changed, it's not completely your fault, to, well, why don't you just get a job? And you're like, well, where am I supposed to get a job? My grandfather worked at the factory. My dad worked at the factory. I was an apprentice. I thought I was going to work at the factory, and the factory just left town. And then they had these asinine responses of like, oh, we should turn them into computer programmers or things of that nature. I think that the technology sectors and the finance sector uh, have allowed the American economy to continue to grow, whereas the actual economic experience of many, many areas in America were not showing growth. We've all seen the dried up small towns. We all know people who have succumbed to despair, maybe not entirely, but they fall off the track, and um, that's a real problem. And people need an economic role. Well, AI is about to do that first. It's going to do it to white collar jobs, and then it's going to do it to blue collar jobs. This Tesla was talking today about Optimus, their robot. Well, that robot will, within 15 years, mark my words, it's going to be a roofer. It's going to be a landscaper. It's going to, truck drivers will not have a robot in them. They will just have a computer in them. And so all these ways to stand on your own 2 feet are about to disappear. But I think rather than just give people, um, money, people don't want handouts. They want opportunity. I think what we need to do is make sure that these gains in productivity go to benefit people. We should give them more time. We should be looking at with this technology, can we continue remote work? So it's not, the valedictorian from Columbus, North Carolina. I don't know where they are, but like where I'm from, the valedictorians, they always leave where I grew up and they go to places like Charlotte, they go to Richmond. My family is still in the house that I grew up in and we miss them. They're not, I didn't grow up in Charlotte. And we're missing all these quiet moments. I wish, but my wife's job, she works for one of the major banks. She can't do that remotely. She has to go check in. I think that government should encourage businesses by allowing infrastructure, possibly by tax incentives and other ways to say, after 4 or 5 years, you learn your job, you get the in-person experience that you need. You should be allowed to go work that job remotely. Let's bring those Wells Fargo, Bank of America salaries to Tryon, to Columbus. And so you can get your work done, have some flexibility working out of your own home if you have that kind of job, and then go see your parents who are still around here. And then also, I think that the government should incentivize the 4-day work week when it's time. That's a conversation that at least needs to begin. The 5-day work week was something that we got through organizing and through struggle. It was, 8 hours of rest, 8 hours of work, 8 hours for what you will. And there's nothing, it's not set in stone. The only thing it's, that maybe is set in stone is a 6-day work week because God said we need Sunday off. But if we can get to a 4-day work week, then we need to do that. And I think government should promote it. And those are just one way where the productivity that we're going to see from AI can go to others. It doesn't need to be that we're all still working 5 days a week and, Elon Musk is a trillionaire and we still can't afford childcare or groceries.
These are all really profound and insightful observations on the challenges that America faces. My last question then is, if we can all agree that these are all important issues, why should people trust you and the Democratic Party rather than your Republican opponent, assuming you get this nomination? Why shouldn't they say, well, Tim Moore and the Republican Party, they believe in tackling these challenges too, and I'm going to stick with them because they're more culturally aligned with me? How do you deal with that?
There may well be a forward-looking Republican who is getting ready for this massive transition that we're all about to see. There may be a forward-looking Republican who understands how important it is to have affordable child care, who, knows what a gallon of milk costs. And but that man is not Tim Moore. I've not met him yet. And actually, later on, I intend to make an appointment at his office to just meet him and introduce myself. But I've been following him now. He's been my congressman for two plus years. And he, unfortunately, he's always playing to the cheap seats in my judgment. I heard him a couple months ago and he was talking about, Doge. And yeah, there was a need to, if we could find efficiencies in government, great. But he wasn't talking about, and he said, oh, we need to reduce the budget deficit. And he said, and, foreign aid will allow us to do that. And, we are paying for, it was like LGBT, Sesame Street in Pakistan. And, the real drivers of our debt are the Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, the military and things of that nature. Foreign aid, I think it's a good return on investment and I support it. Because if you're going to be number one, people forget why America is number one. It's because we do things for people and we provide structure to them. And foreign aid's part of that. But it was just so unserious to act as if, you should be cutting all these workers and that we're going to solve all our problems if we just root out this fraud that people have been chasing for 40 years. And, and it's because of, LGBT Sesame Street in Pakistan. But he just went for that because that's like the emotional issue that gets people wound up. And that's what he does his entire career. I've been, following him. It's all just videos from the border. He'll talk about the border um, you know, when it riles people up, but he won't talk about the drop in immigration that we started under Biden and now has continued under, it went up under Biden, but the last year or two it was dropping, and then now it's continued to drop under Trump. But I'm surprised they're not saying, "Oh, look at this great success we had." But really, the reason they're not is because the point of it was to scare people about these nameless others who were here to ruin the American way of life. So Tim Moore has shifted from that to, this horrible stabbing on the light rail in Charlotte, and maybe that's worth talking about. But I'm sure that soon he will be. Well, I know it's worth talking about, and crime in Charlotte does need some attention. But he's now just going to move on to the next incendiary issue because Tim Moore's purpose for being in office is it's his profession. It's how he earns his living. If he gets out of office, I'm sure he'll just become a lobbyist, and he needs this job to pay his bills. And he uses the job as he did in the state house, and I suspect he's doing in Congress to earn quite a lot of income from his insider knowledge, his insider trading, and things of that nature. But he's not going to be someone who's going to dig down and say, what is actually impacting the district and what can I do to either get ahead of problems that may be arising or to address problems that are already here. He's just not the kind of politician that's going to dig deep. He's going to say his thought process is what gets me on TV, what gets me on people's minds, and what gets a strong emotional reaction that allows me to just, win the exchange, if you could even call that winning, without actually having to get too deep in this policy or that.
I would love to moderate a debate between you and Tim Moore. I think it would be a lot of fun.
I would love to have a debate. I think it'll be a bit of a disgrace. I think just as a matter of course, even if it's a long shot, unless it's like someone who's just, you know, I can't think of an example, but sometimes you get in there and there's just like some random person who got the nomination and they're not even campaigning and they want to, get out there and, talk about like, I know where JFK Jr. lives and we need to get the CIA to go kidnap him and put him in the White House. Like, there are crazies out there. Maybe you can avoid them, but just out of respect for democracy, I think no matter what the status of the race, what the numbers show, incumbents need to go debate their opponents. And we are going to do everything we can to make sure that Tim Moore debates us. We're trying some out of the box things. And one idea that we are going to steal to get ready for this is in the West Wing, they were trying to get someone to debate and they had somebody show up in a chicken suit with a sign that said, "Why are you too chicken to debate?" Well, later next year, there will be the Tim Moore Chicken. They're getting the Twitter account. The Tim Moore Chicken will do interviews and for months at a time, every time there is a Tim Moore event, there will be at least one chicken with the sign. And I want to get to the point where, until he agrees to a debate, and I want to get to the point where every time Tim Moore is discussed as being in the district, this chicken gets a line. And, that's just kind of gets a mention, just to underscore the fact that he's going to just try to ignore the democratic process, as he already tried to do with gerrymandering, and just skate in as safely as possible as he can to the reelection. Well, we're going to, get in his face and call that out. And if we need to use humor to do that, then we will.
All right. Well, it sounds like it's going to be a fun campaign.
I mean, I'm certainly going to have fun with it. They're not all jokes, but you'll be hearing from the campaign in non-traditional ways. I actually will be doing a series of tracks. So next year is the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And I will be publishing a series of tracks, kind of going back to the old common sense pamphlet-like debate, talking about the founding values of the nation and connecting them to the problems we have today. And they're going to be everywhere. They were inspired by like the chick publications that people may have seen, the Christian cartoons that you'll see at, gas station checkouts or rest stops, things of that nature. I will have that, sprinkled through every community. And so whether Tim Moore wants it or not, the 14th district is going to get a debate of ideas, and we are going to talk about some substantive issues. And my wife, who is fully behind this, and my kids, who, to the extent they understand it, I have a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 3-month-old. They are behind it, and we're making the most of it because if you don't do this kind of stuff with a joyful heart, it's going to be quite a grind. And no, so we love going to all the festivals. We love going to stuff like this. And I love meeting people because you get those moments where you break through and you can either say, oh, you have this problem. Well, how about this solution? And people are relieved of that. Or the even better moments are when people come to me and they tell me about a problem or a hope that they have that I had not thought of. And so I love having those exchanges. So those will make it fun on the campaign trail. And yeah, over, between now and March, or between now and the primary, between now and next November, we're going to have a blast, and I hope others join in and have one too.
All right. Well, I think your first interview went really well. So
We'll see, a little rambling, but it's just, I guess I could be polished, but practice makes perfect, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
I think no matter what you think of your performance today, I think people got a good idea of where your head's at and what you want to do. So thanks so much for spending the time with me.
Oh, it's my pleasure, James. Thanks again.
I do.
If you want to know more about Brent Caldwell, there are links in the show notes. In the next episode of Polk Lore, I finally get around to talking with a Republican candidate, Mike Hager, who hopes to replace Jake Johnson as state representative for District 113. Whatever your political leanings, you're going to want to hear what he has to say. In the meantime, send any feedback and suggestions to jamesh@polklore.com. Thanks for listening.